Uncle Dan.
Woo!
It's always good to meet someone new.
Yeah.
And I think it doesn't matter. Look, it doesn't matter where they're from or how far away.
I don't know. Sometimes you go to a party and you meet somebody and you're like, hey, tell me about what you do. And they're like, oh, I'm middle management for blah, blah, blah. And it's just like, oh, come on.
Yeah.
Like,
you totally asked the wrong guy.
So it just depends on like who it is that you're meeting. But even somebody who is in middle management sometimes has some exciting stories to tell from work. So
generally, the guy I talked to at the party, it turns out to be Colin Robinson from What We Do in the Shadows, the energy
right.
vampire.
Yes, exactly.
So, Doug, do you have an energy vampire for us today?
Well, no, I have someone who I think at a party would be pretty fascinating to talk to, actually.
Okay.
Well, dear uncles, as is our wont on this podcast, we often discuss the context and actions of various religious leaders and the religions they founded. We are particularly hard on Mormonism, mostly because we are broadcasting far from inside Mormon lines.
I would say firm but fair. I don't think we're hard on them. Firm but fair.
I'm just going to say that you both said hard on.
Did we?
Well, yeah, of course.
Okay.
Every other word. We also make fun of Mormonism because it's very, very easy. Another favorite punching bag has been Mormonism's younger sibling, Scientology. Indeed, there are a lot of similarities between these two silly sects. Both are American-born faiths founded by a flamboyant flim-flam fanatic with a penchant for underage poontang.
Ooh.
And as night follows day, Paul follows Jesus, and Stalin follows Lenin, both religions' visionary, quote-unquote, founders were followed immediately by an authoritarian monster. The reign of Brigham Young ended long ago, but the modern Mormon church is more his than it ever was Joseph's. I'm betting that when David Miscavige finally has a heart attack from power-fucking a sex doll that looks a lot like Tom Cruise, the same will be said of him and Scientology. Both religions are based on works of fiction so stupendously stupid that millions of human hours have been dedicated to making fun of them. Dianetics and the Book of Mormon don't have a lot in common plot-wise, except in their abilities to unify disparate scientific fields and laughing at them. In the case of the Book of Mormon, it's historians, archaeologists, anthropologists, linguists, and biologists. In the case of Scientology, it's psychiatrists, psychologists, and medical doctors. Sorry, entomologists, I guess you're stuck with the anthill gang. Millions of dollars have been spent trying, at least in the case of the Book of Mormon, to bring the story to the silver screen, most notably in 2003's The Book of Mormon movie, Volume 1, The Journey.
Yep.
This film led to one of the funniest nights of my life when Uncle Mark and Uncle Dan joined the Gamcast boys for a live show here in Salt Lake City and the introduction to my favorite recurring Gamcast character, Fat Camel. Although Dianetics does not really have much of a plot, we're lucky enough to have several other works of fiction by L. Ron Hubbard to draw from. In fact, as most of our listeners are surely aware, Hubbard still holds the record for the most published author, with 1,084 published works, the vast majority being schlocky science fiction.
Yeah, just terrible.
It's super impressive, though.
It's impressive in the volume. The quality is a different story.
No. We're only talking about volume.
That's
We're
right.
talking about quantity. Yeah, it's not quality.
Yeah. And most prominent in these schlocky science fiction works is the 1982 space saga Battlefield Earth.
Yes.
Which was turned into an epic movie event in 2000 starring none other than John Travolta and Forrest Whitaker. Your Uncle Doug may have been adjacent to marijuana once or twice in his past. and
near
maybe,
there too.
Maybe during the late 90s, quite adjacent. And I remember I was in a bit of a phase, and I saw the trailer for Battlefield Earth, and I'm like, fuck yeah. And there I was with my girlfriend at the time, the two of us, on opening day, the only two people in the theater.
Yeah, Doug went through this. Doug, listen, you guys, don't go ever see a movie with Uncle Doug because he wants to go and be first in line on opening day and sit in the front row for every movie.
That's right. I take it in. Oh, yeah. God.
Is Battlefield Earth the one where Travolta had he looked kind of like the Predator? He had big dreadlocks or whatever coming out of him?
Yes.
Yeah, they made a conscious choice to make the bad guys look like Jamaicans, essentially space Jamaicans. So, in addition to being L. Ron Hubbard Scientology garbage, it's kind of jaw-droppingly racist.
Lovely. It is, and astoundingly terrible. Like,
yeah, it's good bad. It's so bad, it's hilarious.
It's in the running for the worst movie ever made, for sure. Yeah. Truthfully,
love it.
After all the Mormon movies we've done with the Gamcast boys, I think we need to demand that we get to do that one as a respite.
Yes.
Yep. I'm going to put them on blast.
All right.
Everybody write into them. Hashtag whatever we are.
We have done the most. We have done more than any other guest hosts. We've done more shows with them than any other guest hosts. We fucking deserve Battlefield Earth.
That's right.
No more Mormon garbage. I was so depressed after our last fucking movie.
You were depressed. I was sleeping on top of a chair, so my feet wouldn't touch the floor. Okay, so the fact that millions of dollars have been poured in to the desperate attempt to bring the fictional works of Joseph Smith and L. Ron Hubbard to life have resulted in 2 films that make showgirls look like Citizen Kane, says all you really need to know about the source material. And I know, Uncle Dan, you're a big fan of Showgirls.
Oh, another excellent bad movie.
Yeah.
But these particular gold mines are far from spent, and until they are, or until either of these cults no longer hold sway on the minds of humans, your uncles are going to put on their overalls, sharpen their picks, and get to digging.
Yeah.
So, with that in mind, there is one aspect of Scientology that I've been thinking a lot about, and it is the life and times of Lord Xenu. Now, Uncle Mark did a dive in an earlier episode into Lord Xenu, but mostly in the context of the Scientology practice of auditing and the progression along the path towards clear and towards operating Thetan levels, etc. But today I'd really like to take a good look at Xenu himself, the problems he confronted, and the solutions he came up with to solve those problems, and what, if anything, we can learn from his example.
I'm sorry, I hate to correct you on the air, Doug, but I believe it's pronounced Xenu, like Javier, right? The X is kind of a.
Is that true?
No. I feel like that would require LRH to have been aware of Mexicans in a way other than just a place to park his boat.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, in a lot of the early accounts, he spelled it Xemu, Xemu.
Yeah. Oh, that's right.
So, yeah. So let's recap Xenu and how Scientologists come to learn about him. The whole point of Scientology is to wring every possible penny from adherents. And the main vehicle to do this is to manipulate the followers through the aforementioned auditing to move level by level up to the removing those pesky thetans from your soul, and we'll definitely talk about that. So after going clear, people are encouraged to continue up towards the OT levels, which every time someone achieves, the religion discovers, quote unquote, a new one. Every step along this path costs money, and those that hit the upper OT levels often end up spending hundreds of thousands of dollars for the privilege.
Yeah.
This helps explain why, when Scientologists hit OT level 3, commonly called the Wall of Fire, they don't walk away laughing like they should. By that time, they've spent buku bucks and have in all likelihood ruined family relationships to get there. So it's a bit of a sunk cost fallacy. It's at this stage where Scientologists learn about Lord Xenu in the form of a supposedly handwritten letter by L. Ron Hubbard himself. We'll discuss this letter in a minute, but this belief by Scientology is similar to the temple rituals in Mormonism. Devout members of both faiths will not talk about them, but former members have given us all the details we need. Mm-hmm. Scientology denies this and has spent an unknown amount of money, certainly a lot, to keep this secret and smear those who have revealed it. So imagine my surprise when I discovered that L. Ron Hubbard had written a screenplay about Xenu and the events described in The Wall of Fire, and for years was trying to shop it in Hollywood.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah. So the 1970s. Yeah, I didn't know that either until I started reading into this. I had no idea. The 1977 screenplay was called Revolt in the Stars. And it was clearly a response to Star Wars that had come out earlier that year.
Oh, my God. He was going to try to take down Star Wars.
You know what? Jump on that bandwagon, baby.
Oh, I wish he had so badly.
Only Lucas can destroy Star Wars.
Oh.
He did a good job, too.
Yeah, he did. It's not a screenplay. It's actually a treatment, but I'm going to call it a screenplay. But it's written in narrative form. Now, disclaimer here. The fact that Hubbard wrote the screenplay and tried to shop it in Hollywood is generally accepted, But because this screenplay would be the Scientology equivalent of a screenplay written by Joseph Smith called How Me and the Boys Made Up the Book of Mormon, Scientology has been working very hard to catch and kill any copies. So the plot of the screenplay is that the forces that finally defeated Xenu after his atrocities here on Earth left a capsule for future intelligent life to find, explaining what had happened. So that's kind of the plot. Humans find this capsule, and it tells them of a long ago space saga that ended on Earth.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it goes into great detail about Xenu, his allies, and his enemies, the most prominent of which is clearly meant to be a gallant and presumably less paunchy version of L. Ron Hubbard. So the 71-page version that I found online may or may not be authentic. I read it anyway. I mean, I skimmed it, and it sure sounds like the crap that Hubbard was churning out at the time, but I can't be sure. Mm-hmm. And in any case, it's not nearly as fun as the summation he wrote for Scientology, so we're going to stick with that.
Nice.
One thing that I think is noteworthy at this point, and I didn't know this, nowhere in the Wall of Fire document, the screenplay, or any of the other writings of Hubbard is there any description of Xenu, his people, or the myriad alien races that inhabit the narrative as anything but wholly humanoid. So I know in the South Park and other popular skewerings of this shit, the aliens are varied and tentacled, but it does not appear that this is what Hubbard intended. I don't know if this was laziness or a lack of imagination, but like in old Twilight Zone episodes or old Star Trek episodes, the aliens just look like us.
Well, he was so unimaginative that he said the spaceships, and maybe you're going to get to it, Doug.
I'll get to this.
That Xenu flew from wherever to Earth in looked like DC-9s or...
DC-8s.
DC-8s, right.
Which was the most common passenger jet at the time.
Yeah, he looked out the window and said, spaceship, done.
Yeah.
Done. Easy.
I mean, in the screenplay, Xenu's home planet is called Home Planet. So it really was a struggle to get through it, and it didn't really give us anything to play with. It was just a very bad episode of the Twilight Zone.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Okay, so just as we progress through the narrative, try not to think of squids or bears or insects. These jokers, just like the Moonquakers, were familiar, although perhaps with a strangely tailored jacket. This informs one of my favorite moments in any science fiction story, when one enemy says to the other after doing battle, "We are not so different, you and I. In another time, I could have called you friend."
Yeah.
Every time that happens in a science fiction story, I get up and cheer. Like, yeah. So, we're going to take as a given that everything described below actually happened. Today we're simply going to analyze the decisions and consequences of the story of Xenu and what we can infer about the culture he lived in. So, we're to the heat of the meat. The document that is shown to Scientologists is not long, and it paints this story, this tale. Some 75 million years ago, Lord Xenu was the ruler of a galactic confederacy of planets, which consisted of 26 stars and 76 planets, of which our star and our planet were a part. So here we get our first glimpse into the culture of these creatures. There are between 150 and 250 billion stars in our galaxy. So 26 stars makes up between 0.000000002 and 0.000000001% of the galaxy. Calling that a galactic confederacy speaks to a bloated and unchecked PR department within the confederacy, which was surely coupled with a bloated HR department, which speaks to a runaway bureaucracy in general. So, this confederacy was founded 95 million years ago, so you can imagine that an institution that was 20 million years old might have some institutional drift.
Yeah, sure. Bloated.
Yeah, why not? Yeah.
Bloated. The bureaucracy is just entrenched and ossified.
Truly. So, since Earth, at the time called TGEAC, which is TEEGEEACK, had no intelligent life at the time, but was claimed by the Confederacy as one of its planets, we can infer that these creatures were colonialists. Hubbard wrote this in 1967, and as I mentioned above, described creatures that looked very much like us, who in fact wore clothing, drove cars, and used trains that looked remarkably like their earthly counterparts in the 1960s.
Sure.
So we can
That's
infer from right. We can infer from this that the Confederacy had achieved corduroy and polyester technology. This would, of course, mean that at least some of the planets, oil had been discovered. This also means that this civilization had crossed the technological threshold into pre-disco electric acid funk, a major milestone in any civilization's progress.
Yeah.
Now, it's unclear if Xenu was elected, appointed, took power in some coup, or if the Confederacy had some sort of electoral college. But Xenu's hold on power was being threatened. It seems the source of this turmoil was an overpopulation problem across the Confederacy. Now,
Yeah, maybe it's like a rotating chair, like on the Security Council. Who
something
knows?
like, there's not a lot to go off of there.
Right.
Now, an overpopulation problem seems to be a self-limiting problem between planets, right? It just seems like a planet would hit its maximum population, and then that would be the problem of that planet. But this was a Confederacy-wide problem.
Because once your planet's fucked, you move to another planet.
That's right. Therefore, we can infer that there was a robust and affordable mass transit system between planets and very liberalized immigration laws. This speaks to at least a period of extensive public works projects and social welfare programs at some point in the history of the Confederacy. We have to assume a fairly high level of taxation to maintain the system, which again necessitates extensive governmental bureaucracy. However, the population problem came about, it had become acute. Okay, according to Hubbard, the population of each planet was 250 billion or so, with the average being 178 billion. How, I can hear you asking, could the average be 29% lower than the average? Well, we don't know.
Don't inject maths into this. It's alien technology. You don't know.
Yeah.
The solution to, I know, right? The solution that Xenu did devise was, let's call it unique, because it sure wasn't elegant. He employed psychiatrists to help him trick billions of his subjects to gather for mass income tax inspections. Yes.
Like all great stories of religion, they begin with a census for taxation.
Exactly. Exactly. Like the census in Matthew requiring everyone to go to the hometown of their ancestor to be counted. This is not how things are supposed to work.
Yeah.
So Xenu then paralyzed these poor souls and froze them with a mixture of glycol and alcohol. Now, let's make some assumptions here. Let's assume that the optimal population of a planet the size of Earth is 10 billion. I know that's a big assumption. And that if the average of the 75 planets of the Confederacy was 178 billion per planet, that's an excess in population of 168 billion per planet, or Confederacy-wide, 12.6 trillion beings. So, if each of these beings was about our size, that would require about a bathtub's volume of glycol and alcohol to freeze them in. The average volume of a bathtub is 50 gallons. That means that Xenu would need 630 trillion gallons of glycol of the glycol alcohol mixture. So, as Mark mentioned,
was it what a hell of a day at the glycol alcohol store,
Right?
right?
so
Honey, we're going on vacation.
Yeah. That salesman got the commission was outrageous.
that's right. Our ship had come in. So, as Uncle Mark mentioned, the main mode of hauling freight at the time were spaceships that looked remarkably like DC-8s. When Hubbard wrote all this down, it was like the biggest passenger plane at the time. And as everyone knows, obviously, the DC-8 had a maximum takeoff weight of 276,000 pounds. Now, this included the plane itself as well as the fuel, but let's assume the Confederacy's DC-8s were not limited by fuel or the plane's operating empty weight. Okay? Fair?
Yeah, because they're spaceships, so the weight only matters for a second.
Right.
I feel like when we started this podcast, I was promised there would be no math.
Strap in. Okay, a gallon of alcohol weighs just shy of 7 pounds. So each DC-8 can carry about 39,429 gallons of alcohol and glycol, which means that to procure the needed amount of alcohol, there needed to be about 15.9 billion sorties. This liquid would then need to be distributed to the 75 planets. So what we can learn from this about Xenu is that he was a big picture kind of guy.
Yeah,
Right?
totally.
Ambitious, right?
And he could make stuff happen.
Yeah, he got it done.
And you know, as is typical of people who get shit done, the more complicated, needlessly complicated you make your plan, the higher degree of possibility you're going to pull it off.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, so once frozen, each of these blocks of ice, now containing a body, were sent to Earth, again called TGAC, again in DC-8s. These blocks of ice were placed next to volcanoes in Loa, Vesuvius, Shasta, Fujiyama, and Etna. Now, here's where I think I can identify a flaw in Xenu's thinking.
What? How?
Not
So far, it has been flawless.
Exactly. And it's not what you think. It's not that none of those volcanoes existed 75 million years ago, although that's a good point. Nope. I think the flaw here is that leaving ice cubes next to active volcanoes seems counterproductive.
Yeah.
So, and just for context, if each of these blocks was 6 feet long enough for an average creature to be completely encased in ice, if you laid those end to end, the 12.6 trillion of them, that would stretch 14 billion miles. Pluto, by the way, is just over 3 billion miles away.
Oh my God.
Okay, so Xenu
You're not stacking, like, you got to do it sort of in a chevron pattern.
Right, exactly.
Sorry, Doug, I just got to jump back. He is officially called Lord Xenu, right?
He is called Lord Xenu.
Okay, well, so he inherited his title. So that's
I don't know if that's their version of president or comptroller.
He's some sort of baron.
Sure, yeah. So Xenu finished the task of killing these creatures by exploding hydrogen bombs inside the volcanoes, causing them to erupt. Now, this clearly speaks to a runaway military-industrial complex within the Confederacy.
Right? Yeah, it does.
Also, volcanoes are great, but they're not nearly as fucking destructive as a hydrogen bomb.
Right, exactly.
So just why did you need the volcano?
If you've got the bombs, just like put them out in space and blow them up.
Why did you freeze these fucking people and carry them all this way just to blow them up with a hydrogen bomb?
Now, that's a great point, and here's what I think could be happening at this point.
Yeah.
It could be that the Confederacy's economy was in a depression or a recession, and that this was kind of a intergalactic version of the CCC, the Civilian Conservation Corps, where the Roosevelt administration paid guys to dig a hole and then paid someone else to fill it in. So I think this might have been an attempt to goose the economy, but we're never going to know that. So now the fact that this insane amount of alcohol and glycol or any trace of the myriad hydrogen bombs have not been found in our fossil record, while the remains of the meteor that killed off the dinosaurs, which happened only 10 million years later, must mean that it has not been discovered yet, right? How else could you explain it?
Yeah.
However, the suffering of these creatures was far from over. Now freed from their mortal coils, the souls of these creatures floated free. Why this was a problem for Xenu to solve is not clear, but it seems that Xenu was not a half-measure kind of ruler. He had these souls. They had the souls of these creatures, called now Thetans, gathered in an electronic ribbon. Think of it as kind of a giant vacuum cleaner. They were then forced to watch 3D motion pictures for 36 days.
What?
Yes. Yeah, I talked about this when I talked about Xenu.
Yep.
And there were like 9 billion people in each theater or something.
Yeah, and even 9 billion people 9 billion... 12.6 trillion divided by 9 billion is a hell of a lot of theaters.
Well, no, there were only like 2 or 3, and one was in the Canary Islands, which was important. I'm serious.
I know.
Yeah.
And as you talked about, Mark, these films they watched were kind of previews of the religions of man, of humans.
Yeah. Okay.
So it dealt with the God, the devil, Catholicism specifically.
Yeah, there was the crucifixion of Christ was previewed.
Yep, and it was meant to confuse these Thetans, I guess, so they wouldn't leave the Earth and go be a problem for...
Well, and it's a giant spoiler. You just told them everything that's going to happen.
Right.
I also feel like, do you think maybe it was more of a blood on the highway sort of thing? Like it was somehow...
A warning.
A warning or like just follow all the rules.
Yeah.
Sort of I don't know.
Well, the one thing we know for sure is that this speaks to a robust and thriving entertainment and film industry in the Confederacy.
Yes.
As well as a very impressive religious studies program. So all of this seems to have been not enough to allow Xenu to hold power, and he was deposed by a group called the Loyal Officers.
Yeah.
He was locked away in an electric mountain trap, which is what he called it, where Xenu is to this day. So some people say it's in the Pyrenees, others say it's in different places, but Xenu is still in prison 75 million years later.
Here on our planet?
Yeah, here on Earth.
Oh, man. Let's find that guy.
So what are the lessons of this story, and is there anything that applies to us?
No.
I don't think so. No. I mean, at heart, it's the story of an unpopular, power-hungry leader of an aging superpower with a bloated bureaucracy and an out-of-control military-industrial complex attempting to distract his disaffected subjects with economic issues while plotting to have him killed. I just don't see how it applies to us. So there it is. There's the life and times of our Lord Xenu.
I love that you have given Xenu 20 times the thought that L. Ron Hubbard ever did.
Exactly.
Yeah. So that was great. I'm going to go freeze myself in glycol and alcohol and blow up a volcano.
I'm going to go look for Xenu. I'm going to find that guy.
And if you'd blown up Mount Etna with a hydrogen bomb, it wouldn't be there anymore.
Biden Xenu 2020.
All right. Let's get the fuck out of here.